I told myself I wasn't going to work on vacation. But with hotel lobbies like this, how can I not?
How to do 10 hours work in 2 hours. Don't shower. Showering is just another chance to procrastinate. You might stink, but who cares? You're here to get shit done. And enjoy your day. Wake up. Throw on the first clothes you see. Move to wherever your laptop is. Just work.
Ultimately, envisioning life without our job is a reminder to be thankful for the role we play in the grand tapestry of our careers and to approach each day with renewed purpose and appreciation. Hashtag job appreciation, hashtag grateful for work, hashtag career gratitude, hashtag love me job, hashtag work-life balance, hashtag thankful for opportunity, hashtag professional growth, hashtag job satisfaction, hashtag career success.
I'm convinced that people who genuinely love their jobs are mentally insane. Now, I think it's normal to love aspects of your job. I'm not saying that it's not. You might think that what you're doing is a very important job, that it has a great impact on the world, right? Or that you genuinely love a lot of your coworkers, or that some of the benefits of your specific occupation or workplace are great. However, there's the type of person who pretends to like their boss, aka normal people. And then there's the ones who genuinely seem to believe it. The ones who stare at you with the blank expression when you try to relate to them about how messed up so many aspects of working for a company today is. Because it is so messed up. There was just recently that video, for example, that went viral from the CEO that was telling her employees to essentially just suck it up and stop whining that they weren't going to get their bonuses that year.
Don't ask about what are we going to do if you don't get a bonus. Get the damn $26 million. Spend your time and your effort thinking about the $26 million we need and not thinking about what you're going to do if we don't get a bonus. All right? Can I get some commitment for that? I would appreciate that. I had an old boss who said to me one time, you can visit Pity City, but you can't live there. So people, leave Pity City. Let's get it done. Thank you. Have a great day.
While she still got like $1 million bonus. There's characters like Elon Musk being praised business-wise for firing half of his company in the most disrespectful and unprofessional way, and as well giving advice on how to get where he is by telling people to work 80-hour weeks.
Just work like hell. I mean, you just have to put in 80 to 100-hour weeks every week.
Gosh,
and then
a lot of work.
Yet we of course know that Elon Musk does no such thing because he spends most of his time tweeting. We know that. And the numbers just don't add up. It feels like for every technological advancement that we make, which always comes with this huge promise of making all of our lives easier, it's in actuality just making every worker's life just a lot harder. Computers, the internet, social media, and now AIs don't actually end up relieving the average worker of menial tasks and thus granting them, a little extra free time because their productivity has skyrocketed. That would be amazing. But instead, the people have seen very little benefits of that nature because the bosses of these companies have decided to pocket all of that extra earning. And instead, at least that's been my experience, we're left to compete with the productivity of these machines and apps and AIs and outsourced labor, which honestly feels like a race to the bottom. It's one that you're not going to win, but there's not really an alternative either, since you don't own your own labor and you need a job because you need money to survive, right? I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I sort of feel like I'm living in the world that's depicted in Fight Club or The Matrix even, a dystopian grayscale cubicle nightmare, but simultaneously there's this whole world online where propaganda about how great all these people who are exploiting us are. Like the people who work us to death are idolized, and people who are in way worse economic situations than I am will just go to bat for them and spend their free time defending their honor. And this all just doesn't add up to me. even if you think that the examples that I've mentioned are extreme and don't accurately reflect your specific workplace or your situation. I feel like you could still get what I mean. I'm currently myself pretty pleased with my employment, and I genuinely enjoy many aspects of working there. But even still, because even with a tolerable and pleasant boss and company, it doesn't take away that the dynamic stays the same. You're still very obviously being taken advantage of by them, and you're left risky and in a completely powerless situation if someone does end up, abusing their power or being not that nice one day. Not that I think that people are evil or personally out to get you, I don't, but the systems of work that we're working under are just set up for this to be the case. It feels to me that work is quite similar to having an abusive partner in many aspects. They might look good or fit your lifestyle or have other attractive qualities. Heck, they might even add value to your life in many ways. Maybe they're a great cook and you don't have to cook for yourself anymore, or maybe they support you financially so you can afford stuff that you'd like. But ultimately, an abusive partner, despite their positive aspects, are abusive. They try to assert power over you, they control you, and they don't mind seeing you in pain if it benefits them. And this will never not be the case, regardless of how nice they are when they're not abusing you. Similarly, there's no actual fair and balanced power dynamic between the worker and the labor owner today. You will always be severely underpaid so that the company can ensure a payout and impressive growth for the investors that they're serving. You will always, as an adult human being, be expected to ask another adult human being if you can take a week off work, and they have their full right to tell you no. Like, we spend so much of our upbringing and our time in school being prepared for the real world by adults. Like, slowly but surely, we're given a little more freedom year after year, a little more responsibility. In high school, they'll start telling you that they're going to stop checking people's homework because that's not how it's going to be in university. Like, no one will watch over you, and you need to prepare for that, for taking control and responsibility of your own life. And I just have no fucking clue why they teach kids this, because the second you get back to work, you're essentially downgraded to a toddler again. Your manager decides when you eat and when you stop eating, when you shit and piss essentially, and they surveillance your every move. They watch over the money you make and give you a little bit of that pocket money to buy you something nice from the store. They're in charge of your development, even though they usually have a vested interest in you staying as long as you can in a lower paid and more menially tasked position. And they tell you that you should be happy with this situation because, after all, you get snacks for free, and you get to go to company events, and you get a couple of weeks off every year, and maybe there's even a ball pit in your office. And I know that this is just how it is, right? But I'm not the only one who thinks this is fucked, right? I'm not the only one whose heart breaks a little thinking about the 8 hours minimum that I have to spend every day sitting in front of a computer for other people's benefit while my body and mind physically just falls apart. See, the only thing that I have left in that dystopian work reality is the ability to bitch and to discuss and to fight for the tiny wins with my brethren in battle at the office. However, the capitalist propaganda brain virus is preventing even this from being possible. It's like certain people have been sent to Azkaban, where their souls were sucked out of them and then they were returned to their desk, where they now seemingly think that Friday bars are enjoyable and that their boss fucking them in the ass is fair, actually. I thought for a long time that these people were simply extremely good at faking it, but it has dawned on me that this isn't acting, but rather, I think, closer to a trauma response. These people do genuinely believe the dumb shit they say, and in many ways, that's even a bigger tragedy. I guess when you're faced with an extremely depressing future, with little freedom and little dignity and little life, you have sort of two choices. You can be aware of it and hate it, like I clearly do, or you can fully accept it and the lies that you're told. And then when you develop the Stockholm Syndrome and you start feeling genuine gratitude for the free nuts that your employer gives you instead of the raise that you deserve and need, then you're at least happy, I guess. It's a decent trauma response to such a fucked up, toxic situation that most of the planet find themselves in. But yet there's something off about these people, something that's hard to put your finger on. Like they're not fully there or properly turned on. I guess red-pilled online weirdos would consider them to be in the Matrix. And I consider these people to just be half dead. They can be pretty nice and alright, but they're never fully there. It's like they're permanently disassociated. And the longer you stay with an abusive partner, the more deterioration you can expect from your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain that's responsible for storing and releasing memory, and that's vital in things such as learning and aging. Not to mention the brain damage that's caused by staring at a screen all day. And perhaps then it isn't that strange to be as fucked in the head as some of these people are. Your abusive relationship with work causes stress. We all know that because it's only a matter of time until people become burnt out. Like victims of intimate emotional abuse can expect long-term brain injuries. I think it's not that big of a reach to predict the same for these employees. In a way, I can very much understand coping by accepting and seeing the positive and being happy as much as you can, not wanting to waste your life being angry or upset at a system that seems unlikely to change. But at the end of the day, cope is cope and not much more, right? But why hasn't it changed? Because the dissatisfaction of workers and the exploitations of workers is nothing new. Marx is probably the best known descriptor of these working class conditions. However, what I find interesting, or most interesting about Marx, is how he predicted that the capitalist society would eventually give rise to its own downfall, leading to the establishment of a socialist or communist system, or at least some other division of labor in society. Now, Marx published his book in the late 1800s, and I haven't seen a revolution yet. But why is that the case? Many actually smart people have attempted to answer that question, Guy Debord being perhaps one of the most influential of those people. He's a French philosopher and filmmaker that's perhaps best known for his work called The Society of the Spectacle, where he critiques contemporary capitalist society, especially the late stages of consumer capitalism that the Western world found itself in the late 1960s. And most of what he wrote, interestingly, is ring perhaps even more true in today's ever more advanced consumerist society. Either way, Debord argues that in modern society, human interactions, experiences, and relationships are increasingly mediated and represented through images, medias, and other forms of representation, like advertisement. This mediation leads to a profound alienation from authentic experiences and a loss of direct connection with reality. He says that the reigning economic system is a vicious cycle of isolation. Its technologies are based on isolation, and they contribute to that same isolation. From automobiles to television, the goods that the spectacular system chooses to produce also serve it as weapons for constantly reinforcing the conditions that engender lonely crowds. Now, Marx's theory of historical materialism is the theory wherein he predicted that there would be a revolution or like an uprising from the lower classes. He observed that throughout history, societies have been divided into different social classes, such as slave owners and slaves, feudal lords and serfs, and capitalists and workers. And each stage of history is marked by the dominance of a particular mode of production, so feudalism or capitalism. And that creates, in turn, the economic and social conditions for the rise of specific class relations. Now, Debord agrees with this part in his idea of historical materialism. However, he adds a significant emphasis on the role of mediation and representation in today's society. Debord argues that in the society of the spectacle, everything that was once lived directly has now become mediated and represented through images, medias, and other forms of spectacle. And that results in a new form of alienation where people have become disconnected from authentic experiences and direct engagement in reality. His analysis suggests that the spectacle is not just a product of capitalism, but an integral part of its advanced stages. The spectacle, in this sense, becomes like a dominant mechanism of control and social organization that maintains the capitalist system. And so, to him, it's not a surprise at all that the revolution didn't happen as Marx predicted. Because despite the exploitation of workers, the concentration of capital, and the financial crises that will cyclically occur under capitalism and lead to class consciousness and then revolution, Debord points out that the spectacle will prevent this from happening. Because it keeps people distracted, focused on materialistic pursuits or media, and even our social movements will become hijacked by the spectacle, which I think rings especially true today. Every social movement is inevitably packaged and sold by corporations and inevitably then also lose their purpose and revolutionary potential. Just look at Black Lives Matter, feminism, or Pride, just to name a few. It is as Guy said himself. Capitalism could appropriate even the most radical ideas and return them safely in the form of harmless ideologies. Another French philosopher, Simone Weil, had further insights into why a revolution was not as inevitable as Marx had predicted. This woman is the real deal. She thought intellectuals had a bad habit of writing about things that they in reality knew very little about. And because although well-intentioned, people like Marx or Debord or Weil herself are generally kids from well-off families who studied at prestigious universities and certainly never had to work a day in their lives as laborers did during their time. So what could they truly know about the conditions of the working class, having never even been close to experiencing it? Simone Weil thought that they couldn't know much. So she set out to do that and got a job as a factory worker in Paris. And in her essay that she wrote from her experiences titled The Parisian Worker in 1933, she provides like a vivid and empathetic account of the living and working conditions of industrial labor workers in Paris. She herself conducted extensive research by immersing herself in the lives of the workers and engaging with them directly, and thus gaining first-hand insight into the actual experience of being a worker. And what she discovered first was that thinking was one of the first casualties of factory work. Like a few days into her job, she was already just super tired. But her tiredness, she said, was much less from the physical demands of her job, even though they were great. And it was more so about the unrelenting pressure to meet quotas and the numbers and repetitiveness of the work. The effect of exhaustion, she wrote, makes it almost impossible for me to overcome the strongest temptation that this life entails, that of not thinking anymore, which is the one and only way of not suffering from it. And under these conditions, it didn't seem strange at all that a revolution hadn't happened again, as Marx predicted. In fact, I think it's strange that it could happen under these conditions. People don't have any mental capacity left at these jobs to consider their oppression or develop any class consciousness or gather together and start a revolution. And although being a lot less physically taxing, I think today's office workers suffer from the same death of thinking. There is, in my experience working in an open landscape type office situation, very little time to think about anything else than meeting targets, how you'll fit in your daily chores after work, or how you might get a slightly higher pay, to dive into any real contemplative thought about the world or where you are in it. It's simply just so exhausting to meet the requirements of the job. And I think it's a mix of all these factors that give way to why people are seemingly content and happy with their undoubtedly exploitative working conditions. Guy Debord and Simone Weil were both living in the mid-1900s. Now, almost a century later, their observations are as true as ever. In fact, I'd say they have worsened. Weil described how Parisian factory workers were not able to think while working because they had to focus all their thoughts and attentions towards meeting production requirements, or else they'd fall behind. And the world is showing very little sign of slowing down. So production needs to happen closer to the speed of light every day, right? I say as someone who's worked many years in advertising, people used to spend like months on campaigns, and they would even do years for developing new creative strategies. But today we don't have time for that. Things and trends are changing so quickly that you need to develop quicker, and thus it leaves even less time for thinking. Not to mention that also thanks to the development of the internet and social communication platforms, we're practically never off work. If a factory worker finished their shift, they'd exit the factory and then they'd go home, at least. But for us, it's not so much the case. I've never had the experience of being able to leave work at work. We're available 24/7 to our boss. And the people who aren't are usually criticized and judged as not being committed or maybe even a lazy worker. And so I'd venture to say that Simone Weil probably thinks that the lack of attention and thinking would be a lot worse today. And so is obviously the speed at which the society of the spectacle now exists in our lives and how invasive media is. You can't go a day without being bombarded with impressions, outrageous news, endless streams of ads, and brain-dead content. We are a generation of people who were raised online, and we don't have a way of communicating without these mediums between us. We keep getting lonelier, we're disconnected, not even from just other people, but from ourselves. And the only answers that we will find to this disconnection that we're feeling will be online. And they come in the form of commodities being sold as self-help or actualization. Like buy a crystal and you'll feel connected with yourself again, right? So both the nature of work dumbing us down, making us unable to think and to consider the abusive situation that we're actually in, combined with the ever-growing presence of media that's designed to make us alienated, complacent, and lack any class awareness, none of these things will make a revolution inevitable, or even possible, if you're really pessimistic about it. Of course, under these conditions, we end up loving our jobs and creating an Elon Musk Stan account in our limited free time. But nevertheless, we shouldn't mistake this cope with something that's good or in any way natural. It doesn't make sense to admire the people who are making money off your back, quite literally. It's not good that so many people are content with the way things currently are, because it's certainly not getting any better.